Maybe not. Good evening. This is the meeting, the September 18th meeting of the Police Advisory and Accountability Committee for the City of San Rafael. Welcome to all. I'm going to invite Lieutenant Eberly to please call the roll.
Thank you, Chair Kamina. I know that Member Nguyen is going to be absent, and it looks like Member Locks and Member Tokolahi, they might be running late, but they're not here. Member Alm?
Present.
Member Alvarez?
Present.
Member Davidi?
Present.
Member Ruiz?
Present.
Member Valdez?
Present.
And Chair Kamina.
Present. So we're
So,
fine.
yes, I'm sorry. So Member Valdez, you'll be a voting member tonight in the other member's absence.
Okay, thank you very much. Would you, Lieutenant Eberly, please talk about the interpretation and public comments for the meeting?
Yes, thank you, Chair Kamina. Before we begin, we'd like to announce that tonight's meeting will include Spanish language simultaneous and consecutive interpretation provided by qualified interpreters on the Spanish channel. If watching on Zoom, you can join the Spanish channel by clicking on the interpretation icon in the Zoom toolbar. It looks like a globe. If you are attending in person and don't have access to the Zoom meeting from your mobile device, please come and see me, and I will get you set up with a device so you can listen to the meeting in Spanish. As a reminder, we ask that everyone participating tonight speak slowly to allow our interpreter to effectively express your comments.
Antes de comenzar, nos gustaría anunciar que la reunión de esta noche incluirá interpretación simultánea y consecutiva en español que será proporcionada por intérpretes cualificados sobre el canal de español. Si mira a través de Zoom, puede unirse al canal de español haciendo clic sobre el icono de interpretación que aparece en la barra de funciones de Zoom como un globo terráqueo. Si asiste en persona y no tiene acceso a la reunión de Zoom desde su dispositivo móvil, venga a verme y le configuraré un dispositivo para que pueda escuchar a la reunión en español. Como recordatorio, pedimos que todos los participantes de esta noche hablen lentamente para permitir que nuestros intérpretes expresen sus comentarios de manera efectiva.
This meeting tonight is being recorded, and members of the public watching online or listening by phone or can listen in by phone by calling 669-444-9171 using the meeting ID 898-5264-7245 #. There will be an opportunity for public comment for those participating in person. Each person will have 2 minutes to provide their comments. We invite each of you to introduce yourselves by name before presenting your comments. We are offering closed captioning for this evening's meeting on Zoom. Select the live transcript button on the Zoom to enable this feature. Thank you, Chair Kamina.
Thank you, Lieutenant Eberly. And I see we have Member Tokolahi has arrived. Happy to have you here. I know you had a long drive from Sacramento. Now is the time to accept or review the minutes from the meeting of August 21st, 2024. Are there any questions from the committee about the minutes? No? Okay. Are there any comments from the public about the minutes? I see none. So is there a motion, please, to move and second the approval of the minutes?
Motion to pass the minutes.
So Member Tokolahi made the motion. Is there a second, please? Mr. Dariush Davidi. So will Lieutenant Eberly call the roll, please?
Yes,
Vote.
thank you. Member Alm,
Approve.
Member Alvarez,
Approved.
Member Davidi,
Approve.
Member Ruiz,
Approved.
Vice Chair Tokolahi,
Approved.
and alternate member Valdez.
Approved.
Chair Kamina.
Approve.
Thank you. Motion passed.
Thank you. Okay. So the minutes are accepted. Now is the time for public comment on any matters that are not in the agenda. I would ask you to come forward, and if you care to state your name, please do that, and you will have 2 minutes Could you put the microphone a little closer so we can hear you? I'm not sure. Sorry, but we want to be able to hear you.
I can yell. And,
Okay, yeah.
oh, right. I'm Stephen Bingham from Terra Linda. And first of all, thank you for your service, for what you're doing. I want to make one quick sort of general comment to pass along to the city council and others. I hope they will revisit not allowing public comment on Zoom. For some people like me and others, it's difficult. I know there's a number of people watching on Zoom, and you all don't have any idea how many they are or whether they have something to say. Number two, because I can't say I'm going to comment for 2 seconds about the use of force. I was disturbed by the comment about shooting essentially to kill, and I hope that because it's easier to hit this section than anywhere else, I hope the committee will explore that further. We see too many situations where guns are used by police to kill when something less than killing could have happened. And the third comment I want to make, I want to recommend that all of you read this book written by a friend of mine. I used to work with him at the Homeless Coalition in San Francisco. He's a professor in New York now. It's called End of Policing. It's not quite as radical as that title sounds, fortunately, because I don't believe in the end of policing myself. But its general theme is the police are being asked to do too many things. And I would like see your role to explore with the police as such as SAFE, which is a wonderful program and a model. What are other ways that things that police are not the best people to take care of that other people can do? And one of the things that is being done in some places, for example, is having non-police do most of the traffic control,
Mr.
stopping
Bingham,
for
Mr.
headlights
Bingham,
and
wrap it up, Mr. Bingham.
that-
Your time is up.
that kind of thing. So just a thought, End of Policing. You can just Google that. And his name is Alex Vitale, Vitale. Merci. Sorry, my wife is French. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bingham. Is there anybody else in the public who would like to make a comment about something not on the agenda? Seeing none, we will close the time for public comment. Also, this would be the time for the committee to consider special presentations. The first is Senate Bill 2, and I believe Mark Wilson, who's been here before, an attorney from Burke, Williams and Sorensen LLP, is going to address us this evening. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. First of all, Mark Wilson again, thank you for having me back. As you recall, I was here a couple months ago to walk through the Police Officer Bill of Rights. And as the Chairwoman mentioned, tonight I was going to hope to quickly walk you through what's known as SB2, which is the new process since 2022 that the state of California uses to decertify a police officer who is engaged in serious misconduct. I want to make sure that everyone's able to see my screen. I'm not sure if I've done that correctly. I apologize if I've failed already. But
Yeah, okay, I apologize.
Yeah, then you
I
can
apologize.
play it out. No worries.
all right, there we go. Now, hopefully everyone can see. Perfect. I hope everyone can see the screen at home and in present. So, police officer decertification. When we're talking about this, we need to first, you're going to hear a lot of what's called the California Post. So it's the California Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training. And POST has actually been around for quite some time, since about 1959. And it originally was created to set the minimum qualifications and standards for police officer training. So for years, police officers would get POST training in a litany of everything from tactics to more community involvement policing, you name it. The best way to think about POST is it is just like, I'm an attorney. It is now just like the state bar or the state medical board. It now controls whether or not an individual who's a police officer can be a police officer. And that's done now with what's called the basic POST certificate. And so every police officer at entry level has to have the basic POST certificate. And that is essentially now the same thing as having a license to practice law or any other thing that you might need a license to practice. So when you hear me mention POST, that's what I'm talking about through this presentation. So one thing to note is while we go through, and I'm not going to be speaking for that long because SB2, although it is extremely important and is extremely revolutionary, really, it really changed the way policing is done and certified in the state of California. It is pretty simple in terms of how it works. But one thing it is important to note, I always think it's key. I have been involved on either side with police officer discipline for over 15 years. And a lot of people don't know that before 2022, California was the only one of 3 states that did not have a process for revoking a peace officer's certificate because of misconduct. So this is kind of a real seismic shift. And there is a lot of things. I know we're going to have questions tonight. There is a lot, since this has just started, that POST themselves are still promulgating regulations. There's still court cases to be had and certain decisions to be made. So nothing that there's a lot of things you may have questions for tonight that I don't have a definitive answer. But SB2 went into effect in January 1st of 2022, and it gave POST the ability to revoke someone's basic POST certification, which essentially ends their career as a police officer. And so I'm going to walk through the various grounds for the decertification part. And there's essentially really 2. There's kind of what I like to call the statutory grounds that are automatic. Then you have the ones if POST finds you guilty. I don't really like using that term, but after a hearing sustains findings of serious misconduct. And one thing I don't have in the slides, but I wanted to, since we talked about Police Officer Bill of Rights last time I was here, and we also talked about internal affairs investigations, this process is wholly separate from any internal affairs and what an individual department may or may not do for an officer. And I'll address that at the end, but essentially you could have someone go through the internal affairs process. If you recall, that's, they are interviewed, then they have a Skelly hearing, perhaps arbitration through an MOU, and they could be sustained or not sustained for various levels of misconduct. But the underlying allegations would still have to be sent to POST, and POST would conduct their own investigation. So now we kind of have 2 different tracks for discipline and accountability for police officers. But POST will essentially automatically disqualify an officer if they were discharged from the military for committing an offense, which would have been a felony. Then also, if you are convicted of any felony, you are automatically decertified. Then it's also additional criminal convictions, and I've listed out here what's in the statute. It's forgery, theft, mutilation, falsifying records. You'll notice all of them really come down to pretty serious misconduct. We're not talking about a DUI here. We're talking about really ones that get down to the entire character of an officer. Also, if you are listed in what's known as the National Decertification Index, or any of the federal indexes, you would be disqualified. Then you are also disqualified, and this is in the what's defined as serious misconduct too. But if you were found to be involved in any law enforcement gang, you may have read some of that in the newspaper, you will lose your post certification. Now, one thing it's important to note, even if you have your record expunged, or if you are set aside, vacated, or any other ways dismissed, you still have your license revoked unless the court finds the person to be factually innocent. So that's all what I kind of put in the automatic disqualifications. Then Post has the power to audit and investigate the fitness of any police officer and audit any agency at any time. And that's a real important distinction, both the officer and the agency, for what they call serious misconduct. And they have stated that the following counts for serious misconduct. That's dishonesty, abuse of power, physical abuse, sexual assault. And here, this is a little bit in the weeds, but there is requirements for reporting sexual assault for members of the public or versus members of when a sexual assault occurs within the department. And here, this is just sexual assault across the board. So they make no distinction of it. Then demonstrating bias, and that is showing any prejudice based on any protected classification, that you can lose your license. Then any acts that violate the law that are sufficiently egregious or with a peace officer's obligation to uphold the law or respect the rights of the members of the public. And here, with that sufficiently egregious, they will also start looking at repeated conduct, not just the egregiousness of it. This is the real area where, and I want to use the term moving target, but we're still finding out. Most they're right now, and I'll walk through a little bit of how it really works. Right now, there is a database of officers who have been decertified. And anyone tonight, when you go home, you can get on Post's website, just Google CalPost decertification, and there's an entire list of individuals who have lost their certification. Then for certain ones, if it is serious misconduct, you can even click on it, and it has to be made public, and it gives about a 2-page summary of findings of why an individual has lost their certification and can no longer be a police officer. And this is a dramatic shift toward transparency that has not existed in any way, shape, or form, except in the last year and a half. And so even though it's public, I certainly in this hearing don't want to throw out people's names, but you can go on and you can look, and there can be serious allegations of sexual harassment, of bias that are already done. Now, some of those have still not been fully adjudicated, because once you lose your license through Post, you can appeal that decision to a superior court in a writ. And there are still some decisions to be brought down, which will provide more insight on what serious misconduct is, and may or may not throw insight on the actual authority that Post has. So I certainly don't think there will be anything questioning their authority, but I do think there will be certainly some judicial guidance on what serious misconduct is and isn't. However, you will notice, if you look through the findings, at least, they are all very serious misconduct. You're not talking about, I don't want to downplay anything, but it's not, taking a couple of pencils from the office supply room. These are pretty like serious workplace misconducts. So does anybody at this point, I was gonna go through in a minute, maybe I was gonna pause for questions, but maybe I'll go quickly through the requirements that the city has now to report their allegations to Post. But there's two ways. And I can, the department has an obligation within 10 days of being presented with allegations of any serious misconduct. That's any complaint, charge, or allegation of conduct against a police officer employed by the agency that could render a peace officer to subject or suspension of revocation of certification. So as soon as an agency gets a report, whether that's from a citizen or it could be internally generated, right? If a superior or coworker sees something, they have 10 days to report that allegation to Post. Then Post will typically wait for the internal affairs or for the department to do its own investigation. Then they will submit their own findings to Post after the investigation is over, saying, okay, we got these allegations, we looked into it. Yeah, there was some, or no, there was no credibility to the allegations. You then have to turn over the whole entire report. Post can either accept it, take a look at it, open up its own investigation. But then the officer at that point would have he deals with Post on his own and isn't dealing with the agency. Does that make sense? And so, then I want to make sure, sometimes I'm really bad. I hate when people just sit and read a PowerPoint. So I'll start talking, but I want to make sure I got all of the points that I wanted to address. That's the mandatory reporting. And so the other way that reports can happen is citizens, well, coworkers can, you can directly report to Post. And you can go on their website. They have a complaint form and you can submit that complaint to Post. Then Post does their own investigation if they like, then often notifies the agency. One interesting thing about the reporting requirements within SB2. So there's a lot of reporting requirements for agencies. A lot of agencies are coming up, and I'm sure the chief has, especially in the early stages, struggle with, okay, what is reporting? What is serious misconduct? What do? We don't want to get in trouble with with the not reporting something in 10 days. There is actually no financial penalty or real penalty under the statute for reporting, but clearly no agency wants to not be reporting. Post has been, in my experience, and I work with agencies throughout the state. Post is very open and has been in good communications with our agencies with what they want, when they want, and how they want it. So it has not been an adversarial relationship at all. Then lastly, part of SB2 did change the minimum age that a police officer can be. So it has to be 21 in order to hold your basic Post certificate. Then here's a large part that's a key part of SB2 is when a law enforcement agency hires a lateral police officer, the agency must contact Post to inquire about the circumstances related to the officer's separation. And Post in turn will be required to respond with relevant information in its possession. So you cannot hire a lateral, and a lateral is just someone who's coming over from a different agency without doing a Post background check. And so that is essentially the reporting requirements. Now, one thing I wasn't going to get to in detail, and I can certainly answer any questions on this. The officers have their own right to appeal any of the Post determinations. They have, Post will make a determination, then they can go to a board of review to appeal that rejection or suspension of their certificate. That is a full-on, it's a administrative law proceeding. It's a hearing officer, witnesses, cross-examinations. Then they have the ability to even take that ALJ's decision and appeal it in Superior Court via a writ if they'd like. But I didn't think, if you guys want to go in more details about their appeal process, I certainly can. But I assumed, if I'm wrong, I apologize, that you might be more interested in the reporting requirements from the agency as well as the serious misconduct. So with that, if there's any questions, as I said, while it's pretty straightforward, it is a real monumental shift in policing in California.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that. Usually I ask the members of the committee to, if they have questions, but I actually am going to go first this time because I have some questions,
Of
if you
course.
don't mind. So Post, who are the people at Post that make these decisions?
So Post, and I have, it's, there's over 245 people who work at Post, but there's an appointed board. If you go on, their website, you can see I think it's nine Post commissioners, that come from all backgrounds. There's law enforcement backgrounds and there's citizen backgrounds.
So is it the actual 9-member board that reviews this or staff? Do you know?
That, I mean, I know it's staff that makes recommendations to the board.
Okay.
Chief, if you want.
Yeah, staff would, so there's a division chief that runs the
okay.
decertification. And within that division or within that unit, there are staff that review the correspondence and exchange of information with Post agencies. And then when the process is being adjudicated, it goes to the board, the 9-member
Okay.
board.
Okay, thank you, Chief. And the second question I have, which is, I understand the process, but maybe for others, you could explain what the process of finding factual innocence is and how that applies to this procedure.
So just so I can answer the question, when you say the process of finding factual,
Well, you indicated that if someone was referred to, was left the police department and somebody else was going to hire them, it wasn't enough that the police department said that they were not being punished, but they would have to be found factually innocent. Did I misunderstand you?
so it's not factually innocent. So what would happen?
Oh, I'm dealing
is-
with something else there.
Sure, well, no. So let's just take a hypothetical. So you could have a department terminate an employee, and the final, let's just start from a hypothetical 0. Say you have an officer who is alleged to engage in serious misconduct, we'll say some serious sexual assault, right? Then say that the department performed an investigation, found them that it was sustained, right? Then the officer had a Skelly hearing and an arbitration. And during that time period, some of those findings were overturned, or they did a settlement agreement that said, hey, look, we agree that there is not sustained findings here. You are not terminated, but you retire or something along those lines, or we'll give you a suspension. Post still does their own investigation and can decertify or suspend them. So then when you're doing a lateral hire, you're not just looking at the previous personnel file from Department X, you're also looking at the Post findings in their file.
Oh, I understand. I was confused about the process. If someone is found not guilty in a trial, there's also a process
Oh.
to show that you're factually innocent. Just, like it's just,
Oh,
just because you're not guilty doesn't mean you're innocent. And so there's a process that you can do. So forgive me, I was confused.
oh, no, and I apologize.
No, no, no problem.
That was on the criminal.
Yeah, I
the
know.
Expungement of the records.
That-
So yes, so just because your record later on is in a criminal proceeding, just because your record is expunged does not mean that you're found factually innocent. And so you can get your record expunged, but that still would not qualify you. Does that?
Didn't mean to make it confusing. So now
No,
it's
no,
time
then I
for the
apologize.
committee. Ms. Valdez, do you have any questions?
Yes, I have a question, and I think he just answered. My question is, Pulse like always investigates after internal affairs or depending of the discovering of internal affairs?
And so the Post, when they would do,
Mhm.
so there, typically they're waiting for the completion of a department to do theirs. But statutorily, there would be nothing to prevent them to do it on their own.
And if I could just add, the police department has 10 days when they learn about police officer misconduct to report it to post. Then they have it and do their thing.
Yeah.
So the post question, if I can jump in on the jumping in, Post has, I don't think this is a secret to anybody, Post has been absolutely inundated with investigations. So what we're talking about with this 10-day window is an allegation. It's an advance of our due diligence and ability to investigate the matter. We have received an allegation and we have 10 days to submit that to Post. So it's different than like a finding, an investigated, investigation with a finding. So that's at the very front end of an administrative matter. Post can investigate, but they do not have the bandwidth to investigate everything. So I think that body is choosing what to investigate on their own. And certainly the lower level ones, they're relying on the organization to do their diligence and then submit the case when it's, submit the case when it's completed.
Yeah. And if I may jump in on the jumping in, so we're seeing an allegation of, say, dishonesty come in. We're notifying Post, inundated is not even the right term. They have such a backlog that I don't know. I think they're working as diligently as humanly possible, but we'll say, okay, we got an allegation of dishonesty. We will conduct either an internal affairs investigation, or at times you can hire an outside investigator. Then as soon as that's wrapped up, we're literally most of the time just turning over the report to Post. And sometimes it's just going into the ether right now. I mean, it's so busy, but especially if it's unsustained, then I think they probably have their own form of triaging.
Thank you. Let's see. Ms. Alvarez, do you have any questions? No? Thank you. Questions, Mr. Fatai?
I do have a few questions. And I apologize if some of these should be my homework before I come here. It's the first time I heard about Post. Is Post national or just California?
It's California. It's California's.
Okay.
But every state now has some form of Post.
Okay. Just curious. SB2, California was one of three. What are the other two states?
I apologize. I could follow up with you on that. I believe the other two I think one of them was Massachusetts, oddly enough, and Texas. I don't quote me. I can get you back. I was surprised, and that I can get you that momentarily. Actually, I have it in my bag.
Cool. No worries. My other questions kind of like depends on, this is me looking at, I think that's also related to some of these questions already. Like let's say a police officer was relieved of his, duties in California and moved somewhere else to a different state. A state that doesn't recognize or does not have Post or not on a SB2. Can they pick up jobs in the law enforcement or no?
So because you lost your California basic certificate, that necessarily would not by law prohibit you from working in Florida, because obviously the California basic certification isn't applicable to Florida, but they are all starting to share data, and it's becoming increasingly difficult, if not impossible.
And this was the reference he made earlier to the NDI. There's a national decertification index. So Post, when there's a decertification, Post submits former officer to the NDI, to the National Decertification Index, which allows other agencies outside of California to have access to that. And I think if you were to ask 10 people on the street that know anything about SB2, I think that purpose really is, half of the purpose is to prevent bad apples from going from place to place. They quit in the midst of a heavy duty investigation and go apply somewhere else. The SB2 decertification process prevents that from happening.
And actually, the chief just made a great point, which I didn't make. So it also prevents someone from, if someone resigns under SB, previously somebody before investigation was wrapped up, they could resign and go take a job in wherever jurisdiction, far, not to be stereotypical, but usually be far away from any of the larger urban areas. The SB2 now makes it required that you submit the final findings, make final findings and submit them to post,
Even if the person's resigned.
even if the person's resigned or retired. So,
And actually, one of the criteria for decertification is lack of cooperation. So failure to cooperate in an administrative process is one of those 9 areas of potential decertification.
Thank
And-
you.
My other question, sorry, my other questions, I don't know how does that link to this, to the topic, but to the level of police officers using social media platforms. Do you guys, I don't know, if they use social media platform, if they're allowed to do that, and using social media platform to sort of like voice their, like opposition to something or, publicly. I don't know, it's,
Do you mean if there's an investigation going on or if it's just some political issue?
yeah, both, like whether there's an investigation or, as individual outside of work, but they're in the force,
so police officers, just like any other public employee, do not have the same First Amendment protections when they're speaking as in their job, right? So what happens is if they're speaking as a private citizen, then they have a different set of rights. If they're holding themselves out as a police officer, then it's a different analysis. But it's called the Pickering test, which the Supreme Court uses. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but each department has their own social media policy. I can't speak specifically to Santa Fe's policy, but I will say this: most departments are advising people to stay off this media, usually unsuccessfully with some of the younger ones. But
thank you though.
Any other questions? No. Mr.
Mr. I'm sorry, before you start, can we just toggle the
Of course we can. toggle
interpreters
the
real quick? Thank you.
interpreter.
Okay, thank you for the break.
Properly toggled.
Properly toggled.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Do you have any questions?
Couple. I'm a little confused by someone, the example was discharged from the military and then they could go through a decertification process. How would they even have a post license if they were decertified from the military?
so there are plenty of officers who serve concurrently, whether it's in the National Reserves. or
Okay.
anything, right?
That makes sense.
That's
Understood. So let me ask the elephant in the room. So has any citizen or us as an agency reported any Santa Fe PD officer to post?
We've received a number, I don't know, I don't want to say a whole bunch, but we've received a lot of allegations that we dutifully investigated, sent the investigations to post. The one part we haven't discussed is after post reviews it, they send a closure memo
Mhm.
to the chief of police, which articulates their consideration of the matter closed. So there have been a number of allegations that we receive in the course of, internal affairs investigations, and our professional standards lieutenant manages that process.
Am I to understand the officers that were terminated are going through that process?
They have been submitted to post, yes.
That's it.
Thanks. Mr. Davidi, do you have any questions?
I don't have any question. Thank you, Mark, for your presentation. I think by the time it comes here, all the questions that I wanted to ask already been addressed. So thank you.
We'll move you to the other end of the
Yes,
table.
I need.
Ms. Ruiz, do you have any questions?
Mi pregunta es,
My question is,
cuando un policía comete alguno de estos delitos, ¿solamente se le quita la certificación o también va a la cárcel como una persona como nosotros?
these police officers who are accused and found guilty of misconduct and receive decertification, would they also go to jail like any normal person would?
That only depends if the underlying allegations were criminal itself. You could be decertified for behavior that qualifies for decertification, but is not illegal. For instance, you could be, as the chief spoke about, if you were uncooperative or if you were dishonest in an internal affairs investigation, that in and of itself may not be criminal, but could result in decertification.
Thank you.
Of course.
Okay.
Good question.
Seeing no other questions from the board, now would be the time for the public to make any comment about this topic. I see people, but nobody's getting up. Okay. Well, then we'll close public comment time. And then now would be the time for any board members to make a comment as opposed to asking a question. We'll start. Ms. Ruiz, do you have any comments you would like to make on this topic?
No, thank you so much for your explanation.
Mr. Davidi?
No recommendation at this point.
Mr. I'm sorry.
I would only comment that I think their review committee is having a meeting coming up in October, mid-October. I'd be interested in reviewing that, and reviewing their past videos. I believe our former sheriff is on the board.
I believe so. Interesting.
So I'm glad we have some input locally.
Thank you. Mr. Tokolai?
I think my only comment is I just wish that the public learn about these, because they get access, because they can go to post website and report, if they're not happy with anything. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how much of these informations or how many of the public, knows about these, but yeah, thank you though. It's great. I mean, it's learning experience for me as well. So, yeah.
Ms. Alvarez, do you have any comments?
I would, no comments, but I would like to appreciate him on his presentation. Helps us better understand what Post does in
Thank you.
California, so.
Thank you. And Member Valdez?
Not any comments. So just thank you for the presentation. I think it was really clear and we could kind of understand. Yeah, thank you.
And I add my thanks. I think it was very well presented. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay. We are moving on to the next topic, which is, the next item would be to review any feedback on the San Rafael Police Department use of force presentation that we had last time. So
I do have a staff report
you
that I
have
could,
a staff
a
report.
very short one that I can present
Okay,
for you
that would
all.
be very helpful. Thank you.
Just a couple highlights, a reminder, our last meeting, Sergeant Cleland was kind enough to give us a very thorough presentation on the use of force. I do want to highlight two things. First, that our police department holds protection of human life at its highest priority when it comes to the use of force. Officers are encouraged to handle situations by using time, distance, and communication and available resources that we presented to you at last month's meeting to de-escalate conflicts whenever safe, practical, and appropriate. I also want to highlight the number, the statistics that were given in last month's. I think it really plays to a lot of what has been presented and talked about during the other topics. And it's specifically the use of force cases in regards to the amount of calls handled. In 2023, just as a reminder, we handled 44,465 calls for service. Out of those, only 53 of them resulted in a use of force incident. So it's 0.12% resulted in the use of force. These numbers are important because they underscore the importance San Rafael Department puts on crisis intervention, de-escalation, cultural awareness, bias-based training, and how the department routinely uses their training, along with respect and compassion towards our public, to the people that we serve, so that we can mitigate problems to a peaceful resolution. This is the culture of San Rafael. And I think these numbers not only show it, I think they prove it. The norms, the beliefs, the values of the men and women of the San Rafael Police Department are centered around respect, compassion, and de-escalation, and above all else, in order to achieve these peaceful conclusions. Most of the presentation was provided to you, but we did also include the attachments again. And I would like to now invite you to give any final recommendations or comments that you have that would go against or go towards our annual report.
Okay. So we'll start at this end. Ms. Valdez, do you have any questions about the use of force report?
No. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Alvarez
No.
and Mr. Tokolai?
I don't.
No. I think your presentation was excellent, and the one before, and I understand it and appreciate it. Thank you. Mr. Alm?
Thank you for the clarification and the report. But I have nothing further.
A few comments. There was mention about the use of canine and being trained, and also drones. I think those two are that stood out for me as far as alternatives that we can implement more. I know there's a budget involved. Would like to hear more about that in the future as far as how else those two can be used.
Actually, I have a question about your question. Do you think this committee should make a recommendation in its report that about use of force that the council consider canines and drones to add?
I do. I think it's a good, I'm sure it could be a budgeting thing or it could be a training thing, but I think we should add drones, canines. Yeah, I know we have the SAFE team, it's alternatives. I haven't read that book yet, but I think given what we've presented, those are the two top ones that I would like to see the city pursue more.
Thank you. Ms. Ruiz, do you have any?
Any comment?
No, okay, thank you. Now would be the time for the public to make any comments or ask, about the use of force presentation from last month. Seeing no people from the public, we'll close public comment time. And then we will, I guess I did it out of order. I've already asked for comments and questions about the report. So I don't think there's a need to do that again. Sorry about that. So is there, I recommend that we accept the report. And
So all the recommendations that you make now will go to the annual report. And I really do think that after we get through this first year, it's going to be a lot more, I'm hoping it will be more clear. So this is the time that when the comments that you make here, this will go to Ms. Olson, and she is going to put those in the annual report. But we will capture the comments of Mr. Davidi, the comments that were made last month as well. So it's not just the follow-up month. We'll all include that.
thank you. So then we move on to our next item, which is youth and policing. And the staff is going to present a report.
So maybe I'll take the opportunity to introduce our presenter tonight. Sergeant Mike Mathis is one of our field supervisors here in the San Rafael Police Department. And he's has a very rich history here with the department and has a history of positive interaction with youth in our community. So he's going to be presenting on the topic of youth and policing. And we've talked about POBAR, and we've talked about SB2 and those types of things. So I'll just share as an aside, Sergeant Mathis is also the president of the Police Officers Association, or excuse me, the San Rafael Police Association. So he wears a bunch of different hats, but with no further ado, I'll turn it over to Sergeant Mathis.
Well, welcome to you. Sergeant Matheson, I think you have to turn your microphone on. Notice by member.
There we go.
Thank you.
Oh, you gotta hit this one. And then you can go to.
Perfect. Thanks, LT. Hello, board. Like the chief said, my name's Sergeant Mike Mathis. I've been a police officer here for 28 years. And I had the pleasure of being a school resource officer here for 3 years, from 2015 to 2018, working with the 17 schools that are in our jurisdiction. So obviously I will leave questions till the end, but I'm going to do a brief overview of what the SRO position meant to me and what the SRO position meant to the San Rafael Police Department when it was in effect. But briefly, I just want to say that in 2014, President Barack Obama gathered input from practitioners about subject matter experts and other stakeholders through listening sessions and written testimonies. Ultimately, they decided that a recurring theme of juvenile justice emerged, highlighting the importance of positive engagement between police and youth. The positive engagement can enhance public safety, reduce crime, and victimization, decrease repeat offenses, and build trust between youth and people in law enforcement. That was a strong sentiment when I was doing the job. I concur with that statement 100%. I really enjoyed working with the kids, and I never was proactive at the schools. It was all reactive policing. So with that said, I have implemented some photographs, which I'll ultimately get to, but most of the photographs revolve around Camp Chance, which is something that this police department's been participating in 22 years, approximately, with the youth of Marin County. So our law enforcement officers who serve as counselors, role models, and advocates for students while keeping them safe. They have received special training that enables them to develop positive working relationships with students, school staff, law enforcement, other first responders, and community groups. Because of this, their physical presence at schools gives students, parents, teachers, and other community members greater assurance that their schools are safe. And I exclamation point that a statement 100%. This is a little photo heavy. So this was a picture taken at Camp Chance. We dress in uniform one day just to show the kids that are human, that we're human beings. We go by big campers. We're at Camp Chance because we just hang out and play with them and share in everything that they do. So on September 14th of 2020, post my career as an SRO, the San Rafael school board meeting, the board voted to remove SROs from public schools in San Rafael. The prevailing perception was that SRPD was actively patrolling campuses, targeting students of color, and citing or arresting them. And this instilled fear in the community and played a significant role in the removal of SROs from San Rafael schools. In 2021, SRPD spearheaded an extensive research report on the role of an SRO in all the Marin County schools related to student arrests and citations. The report documented every arrest or citation issued between 2017 and 2020. It provided detailed breakdowns of students' demographics, schools, and types of arrests. The final outcome of the research revealed that the San Rafael SROs were not proactively arresting or citing students. All arrests and citations were a direct result of reports from victims of crimes on campus or from school staff members. Um, so law enforcement develops successful programs to engage juveniles through non-confrontational activities and promote positive policing and youth interactions. SRPD offers Camp Chance as well as our cadet program. And our cadet program, which provides an opportunity for students interested in law enforcement. Cadets provide public assistance. They assist in police department functions, such as crime prevention, patrol support, community outreach, and records and front office support. The position allows for up to 20 hours of paid work per week and has a limited term of 3 years, with the goal of the cadets completing their education and becoming members of the San Rafael Police Department. Case in point, we've had numerous cadets go through our program and then go to the academy and then become law enforcement officers with our city. Camp Chance, since its inception in 1999, over 1,223 youth from Marin and Sonoma counties have benefited from this enriching camp. At camp, children participate in traditional camping activities such as swimming, hiking, and nature studies. In addition, they are given an opportunity to create and foster rapport with peace officers in a personal and relaxed settings. The rapport was historically continued to flourish when the children return home. Building these relationships with police officers, students are less likely to engage in destructive behavior and criminal activity. I had taken part in Camp Chance for, like I said, over 20 years. I got my nickname from Camp Chance. They started calling me Mickey D when I had hair and I had a receding hairline. And that name had stuck forever. And I was always known as Mickey D there. And still to this day, when I run into kids that have attended Camp Chance in the Canal neighborhood or in San Rafael, they still call me Mickey D. It isn't Officer Mathis, it's Mickey D. It's really heartwarming. Improving connections with young people. It is essential that the SRPD assign a specific officer as a liaison to work in the high schools and middle schools in San Rafael. The officer would concentrate on building relationships, cultivating positive connections, and acting as a role model with the youth. Having a dedicated officer for youth engagement will establish a direct channel between the school and the police department. Having a consistent officer in this role is crucial for mentoring relationships with the youth and providing improved service for students, parents, and staff. And I really created a lot of great relationships with school administration when I was there. Two things that I'd just like to touch on. There were some listening sessions that San Rafael and the city did with the children in 2020, or the juvenile youth in 2022 and 2023. In 2022, the San Rafael High School did a listening session with staff and officials, and no SRPD members were present during this listening session. And the students at San Rafael High School did raised some concern about they didn't feel safe in their neighborhood, and they felt uncomfortable with police officers on campus. In 2023, Terra Linda High School did the same type of thing. This time it was city officials as well as city staff, and it was also attended by a San Rafael Police Department captain. During that session, there was some more positive feedback that the kids gave regarding their opinions of police officers on campus. Key themes were getting to know police officers personally and building relationships with them. And they also felt that police officers should attend more events like Hispanic Heritage Night. I reached out to a school security officer that I worked closely with, and I touched base with him. He's been out of the San Rafael City school system, and now he's working down in Mill Valley for the middle school there. And I asked him about what school has been like since SROs had been removed. He had no actual facts. He just had a feeling, per se, that he felt that crime was up and things were not being reported to the police. And I could probably concur with that sentiment. Things are getting reported to us from the schools, but not nearly in the abundance that it was when I would go to the schools to check in with administrators. Then I also reached out to someone who's still working for the San Rafael City Schools, and she used to be a front office worker at Terra Linda High School. And I spoke to her about her feelings around the campus. And she feels that gang violence is going up, gang presence is going up, and criminal behavior is going up, and it's not being reported back to us. So again, I wish I had facts and something to present to but I don't think they would steer me in the wrong direction. So my personal belief is I really enjoyed the job. I think the people that followed me into this job to follow into the SRO position and the person that trained me, we weren't out there snatching up children to get a stat. We were really responding to the school's needs. And when the school needed something from us, we were a mentor or a liaison or an enforcement portion of that when we were present. And I really feel that the city would benefit if the SROs were back. With that, I don't have a question slide, but I'm open to any questions that myself or the chief can answer.
Thank you very much, Sergeant Matheson. Ms. Ruiz, do you have any questions? This is question time.
Al parecer ya no está esto en las escuelas. Ellos ya no están en las escuelas actualmente.
So apparently there's no longer a presence in school at this moment.
Not as regular as it was when there was a officer assigned to move from the schools to other schools. We're more called when we're needed. I would check in with the schools daily.
My understanding is that the San Rafael School Board decided not to have that program. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And and the other thing is I've talked, I've obviously been in the business for a long time and know many officers that were school resource officers, and they would like show up at recess with the small kids and play ball and basketball and just formal relationships. So it's not a question. I'm sorry. It's a comment.
I concur.
I concur. Mr. Davidi, do you have any questions?
Yeah, first of all, my hat's off to you. What an amazing thing that you've been doing. Can I call you Sergeant Mickey D?
Sure.
Okay, just want to be respectful. I used to run an anger management course in the city of Watts in LA. And one of the things I learned at the end that these kids have never seen the Santa Monica Ocean, even though it was 20 minutes away, and how amazing it was just to be able to interact with nature. How just to get out of their circles and see there's something outside, and it just opened up their mind. So I really believe in what you're doing. And it's also a way to change the narrative about policing, just to see a police officer to, regular clothes or just hang out with them, or just the fact they give you a nickname. I think that's how they bond with you.
Absolutely.
I have kids go to public school here. I live in the city of San Rafael. I'm really invested to see these schools, get to their potential. There's amazing teachers, there's amazing staff, but there's potential to grow more. It's the first time I feel somewhat ignorant. I didn't know that the policing has been removed or the board had made a decision. I'd like to get more feedback from what you think or what the committee thinks here. Maybe it's time to kind of revisit that, because given where our schools are headed, because that impacts future of our kids. I mean, future businesses here, the price of housing. I mean, it's not just about money. It's about the future for kids and education and just the reputation our schools has, So I like to kind of get some feedback from you and what recommendations you guys have as far as what you're thinking to revisit that.
I don't really know what the process would be to go back to the San Rafael City Schools to make a motion to get the SROs back, but I would strongly encourage that process to begin. I will say I'm a little biased because I've done the job and I knew how rewarding it was for me and how I liked working with the children while I was in that position. So I'm in your corner, and I don't think I'd be here unless the chief wanted me here to share my stories and share my experience, but I'm a strong advocate for school resource.
All right, well, you have to, because I would walk with you on that path, because I graduated high school in '93. We had a police officer there. At first, everyone was scared of him, but at the end of the senior year, he was kind of the homie, we respected him, but he was friendly. And I think, people back in the day wanted to be police officers or firefighters. You kind of see more kids dressed up in Halloween as firefighters, not as police officers. I think it's time to kind of be able to regain that trust. I mean, this takes small steps, but I don't want to use more time from the floor here, but you got me kind of emotional, and I'm just want to share what I was thinking. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, and I'm just going to jump in, Member Alm, if you'll forgive me for jumping in between. So it's a little bit of a slippery slope, because the San Rafael City School Board gave us direction that they didn't want our presence in the school in the form of our SRO program. Now, we are very interested in hearing what recommendations this body has for us and any comment that we may hear from the public as well. So, members of the organization certainly have their opinions and their thoughts based on their experiences. But, representing the larger San Rafael community, we're really interested to hear what thoughts and recommendations you all have. So.
Thank you.
Member
First off, thank you. I appreciate that. Anecdotally, what do you think broke down? Like, how did we get a huge disconnect with the school board?
I think if you look at the report, it references, George Floyd, the riots, the demonstrations, and it was kind of in that era when that started in 2020 and ultimately the catalyst in 2021 is kind of what the report references. So a lot of things got turned upside down during those years, and I think that might have been part of the precipice for it.
Understood. So are we no longer budgeting for SRO?
Yeah, so at the time we discontinued the program, we had 2 FTEs. We had 2 full-time police officers assigned to the school resource officer role. One was actually grant funded. The other was part of our operating budget. The one that was our operating budget was reassigned, and the grant, we surrendered the grant and discontinued both positions.
Was it reassigned to other youth-related
It
programs?
was initially reassigned to the investigations unit as a kind of crimes against children investigator. And that has since morphed, and we've been through some staffing challenges. And so it's nothing what it looked like at the time.
Sure. With the self-report that we generated, was that shared with the school board?
I'm looking at Lieutenant Everly. This was before I got here.
I'm sorry, what self-report?
Well, the investigation on interactions when we had a SRO.
The report that he
Correct.
described.
So that report that we conducted in 2021, that was all police contacts. So since we ceased that relationships with the schools in the sense of always being there, there's no more data. Does that make sense?
Understood, but I was understanding that essentially what was determined was we were being reactive versus proactive.
Oh, yes.
And I'm hoping that we would share that with the school board, or we did, or?
Yes, we did. That was shared through actually all the county chiefs. That was shared through Marin County Office of Education and the Santa Rosa City Schools. Is probably, I think, all of the school districts that we shared with, because it was not only if you read it San Rafael based, it was every school in Marin County.
Understood. With that data is old. It's really hard to put a lot of context to it because we're in a post-COVID world. And jumping ahead to my recommendation, I definitely would recommend we relook at this data and run the numbers again, especially to support.
The problem with that is the school doesn't keep, this was our data. This was the police department's data, so that there's no more data anymore. So we have asked the schools through the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency and Crime Prevention Commission, ask them for the data. They don't keep the data like we kept the data.
And
That's interesting.
That's very interesting.
Something.
Well, there's no data because you're not there to receive the reports, to receive the information. I'm
Well,
sorry, I didn't mean it to.
We're still taking calls though, correct? And interacting.
Yeah. So there was restorative justice came much more prevalent in the schools. I think that's not a bad thing at all. I think they were handling it internally and keeping, kids out of the criminal justice system, which we're fine with. I just want to reiterate the fact that the liaison portion of the school resource officer, or whatever we want to call it, that relationship building, the mentoring, the overall knowledge about what's going on in the schools that does spill out into the streets is missing. The criminal stuff, I agree with. The restorative practices are great and they seem to work internally, but there's still the bigger cases that we have to deal with.
I was shocked that Davidson was the #1
Yes.
school. I couldn't believe it.
Yes.
In interactions. That was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
What was going on there?
Is that a question?
Yeah,
I
what's
mean,
going on at David? What's
it-
been going, like, why is
yeah.
it such
There-
a
there's
high?
probably a lot to that. I think, just in a very short, from a non-educational, but, a parent. Junior high is historically one of the toughest because all this different children are coming from different elementary schools that have already established a quote unquote pecking order. And then when you go to the junior high, they have to reestablish that. So tends to be historically more fights and more trouble in the middle schools.
The model is totally different now. So not having school resource officers who have relationships with the site administrators, who have relationships with kids on campus, who have regular interaction with kids on campus to hear, hey, did you hear so-and-so and so-and-so are going to fight after school? That allows our school resource officers to develop a posture like, I think I'm going to go over here today at 3 o'clock instead of, right? So, and in today's model, it requires a call to dispatch from a vice principal to a random patrol officer who has no relationships really with any of the kids, who has no relationships with the front office secretary, who has no relationships with the principal or the vice principal. So it's just a very, very different model, and it puts us on our heels a little bit in terms of getting ahead of, what's going on in the schools.
More?
Oh,
And this is just related to Camp Chance. It seems like it's basically our only hope. How are we really and basically to get into the program, it's by nomination from some sort of school administrator, teacher, or whomever. How are we soliciting this to the schools?
So we have in the SRO days, it was very different, right? We had a lot of relationships, we had a lot of firsthand knowledge, and we had kind of an inside track to individuals who would have a great advantage to an opportunity like that. Now we have officers who are more connected than others. We have officers who do have relationships in the community and in some of the schools. And we work with the site administrators to develop a cadre of potentially interested students and go from there. We had 65 participating students this last year, super successful year. And, our reentry to Camp Chance after COVID, we were all a little bit nervous, but we had a super successful year this year and look forward to doing it again next year. But it's just one of many efforts that the police department manages to continue to connect with and foster relationships with youth in the community.
Thank you, Chief. Ms. Valdez, do you have any questions about the presentation?
Right before I'm so sorry, but we need to
We're going
toggle
to
the
toggle again.
interpreters. Sorry.
Testing.
Are we toggled? I just would like to point out, Ms. Olson, that since your arrival, the toggling has been going much more efficiently. Thank you. Ms. Valdez, do you have any questions about the presentation?
Yes, but remember, I'll ask my question too. But my other question is like, if the cadets program still exists in the schools?
Our cadet program exists inside the police department itself. We do some recruiting out of high school and try to get kids that are kind of starting in college and are interested in going into law enforcement, whether that be dispatch, working in front office in the records department, or working patrol on the street. And so we kind of recruit for that position, and then they come in and they still go to school, go to college, come work for us part-time. And they're an incredible asset. We don't have like a junior police officer program, but if we were to name it, they're great cadets. They do a lot of work for us, and they're true assets to our department.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Ms. Alvarez, do you have any questions about the program, or since you're our
Just-
youth representative?
Just one, other than the school resource officer, are officers in some way still interacting at school in some other way?
Kind of like what I touched on a little bit and the chief kind of piggybacked on. We're really only responding to the schools when there's a major incident. So
Right, but
something that-
like other than that, are officers some way interacting with students at
Yeah.
school?
Very informally. Very informally, but really no. It's just too difficult when they're managing other calls for service throughout their assigned shift. So the opportunities that we take advantage of are, like our Touch a Truck event or other, like Slurpee events or whatever other events that we try to coordinate. The philosophy really in terms of building relationships and taking advantage of that mentoring role model opportunity is to really build on those positive non-enforcement contacts, right? And that's what Camp Chance is for a week. That's what, Touch a Truck, youth in the community can come out, crawl around in an ambulance, crawl around in a police car, crawl all over and get their fingerprints all over a nice shiny police motorcycle. And, but next to each of those vehicles are, police officers or dispatchers or, professional staff within our organization where, these young people have the opportunity to meet professionals in the public safety arena. So there's other programs, but to answer your question as directly as I can, we really don't have a formal opportunity for people to intermix at the schools.
My brother went to a camp like end of June. I'm not sure if it's the Camp Chance, but it had to deal with police officers. He really enjoyed it. He was like, I want to become a police officer also now. So yeah.
awesome.
Not sure if it's the same program, but yeah. They went to Walker Creek.
That sounds like it. Yeah.
Yeah, he went to that program in June. He enjoyed it a lot. So
Great.
Yes, thank you so much.
So a lot of clarifications, questions. So the camp is still going,
Yes,
and SRO, which is for the San Rafael Public Schools, right?
yes.
Private schools are excluded. Then they're on a different world, right? For-
Yes, but if they called us for assistance, I've done presentations at our private schools for them. They wouldn't call us so much for criminal things,
Yeah.
but if they had I would do presentations regarding school safety or critical incidents at most of the schools. So I was involved with them, but not nearly as much as the city of San Rafael schools.
And only, sorry, did I ask this? Only high schools and middle schools, right?
Any school,
Any schools, including
elementary.
elementary and College of Marin too?
No, not
No.
necessarily college or Marin. It
Because
would
they
be-
have their own, right? Yeah. It's, I don't want to say inappropriate stuff, but when it comes to young people, like I hold them close to me. Like I work with a lot of young people throughout my entire career before I moved here. I also have two young ones, two girls. They also went to school together with his son. My biggest concern now is safe space for kids. It doesn't matter where they are, whether it's at school, because to us parents who have kids, like we think school, it should be one of the safe space for them when they're not at home with us, There's also opportunities. I don't know if the school board should look into this, like an outside space from school, if they ruled out, SRO in 2020. I don't know if they still have the same members. I know there's a few new members on that board. Maybe we can just approach them, because I really like the idea of, and I think you already have this feedback, the benefits of kids, the human interactions. I think that's what I'm trying to say. The human interactions, kids and police officers, like look at firefighters, like every time they love doing that, What about police officers? They're already labeling them just by looking without talking and interacting, It's it raised my blood to a level where my wife always tell me like, just calm down, you're not in that, space to say, but what do you think about these safe space? I love the idea of them going to the schools. There's also that opportunity, like maybe the city can have some sort of like that safe space outside school, but I don't know to some extent, like allowing kids to be part of, to come into those space. I don't know, like you might have to go through the schools and parents and all kinds of other stuff getting involved.
It probably is a great idea, but I don't know that it's a topic
Right.
that we can get involved in. Perhaps.
Well, this means to get your recommendation to go to the annual report, to go into the annual report, which will be presented to the city council. I definitely can find out, you're a member of the San Rafael. And if you want to attend a San Rafael City School Board meeting, I couldn't stop you.
Right.
I was talking about this safe space issue. Maybe you could clarify what you meant
Oh,
by
yeah.
that.
I'll tell you one example, like at the mall in Terralinda, the Northgate Mall, there was, I don't know if they're still there. There was a space there. They say students will go and hang out there after school, do homeworks. It becomes a safe space for them. I don't know if they're still running. Maybe not. I remember like 7 months ago, I was there. No, more than that. There were tons of high school kids, especially from Terralinda High School, who after school hangs out there. They do homework, and they also have folks who work in that space. They're mentors, who work with these kids. Some of them, I think they're retired teachers. They help some of these students while waiting for their pickup. So mom and dad will pick them up from that space, So, I mean, like, that's a safe space for them outside of the school, and it's in the mall. So I don't know about all the little details, but I'm not sure if that space is still running. I don't think we have a lot of those opportunities for young people to, if we're not taking the services to the school, but can we provide those services outside of school in safe space, like public spaces?
Well, thank you for your
Thanks.
comments. I appreciate it. I don't have any questions. And actually we've sort of mixed questions and comments together here, which we always do, but I think it's a wonderful program. I've been a supporter of Camp Chance. I remember when 200 kids used to go. And I commend you for your work. And I, for one, think a good recommendation would be to somehow have this board communicate with San Rafael City Schools that the general consensus seems to be that it would be great if you let the school resource officers back. So since we, a question, and then we're going to do
When we do have an SRO, is that officer off general dispatch?
When I was the SRO, and I'm sure it would go back to that position, I was a part of the investigations unit, so I wasn't part of patrol. I was my own person, and that's how it was pre me and post my post position as SRO. And I had my own phone, and all my administrators had my own phone number, so they'd call me directly. They wouldn't have to go through dispatch. They would just call me, and then I'd prioritize calls for service amongst the schools, and the phone usually did not stop ringing.
Thank you so much. Well, now would be the time for public comment on this topic. I see somebody's coming up. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is George Pegalo. I taught at Stanford University in the Center for Education Research for 25 years, worked with young people there. And since moving to San Rafael and Marin, I've spent over 30 years working in schools throughout the county to amplify student voice and participation in the school setting and in their communities. And have actually worked with student representatives on the school board in San Rafael under contract. So I had a lot of contact with students at all the campuses, including, San Rafael, Terra Linda, Madrone, and Davidson Middle School. When the meeting was held of the Board of Trustees of the district, there were many, many students who spoke against SROs. But it was clear to me that there was not a lot of understanding on the part of students, who are the key target of all of this, as to what the purpose of the SROs was. And I think a lot of them didn't understand that developing human relationships is critical to making any system work. So I also have worked, by the way, for many years with the County Office of Education, and I'm currently working with John Carroll, who is the new superintendent, to amplify student voice in the work that we do from the county office. I also am the co-founder of the Marin County Youth Court, which was started in 2005, and actually spent some time at Camp Chance. I think it was operated by YMCA for a while, or at least, yeah. So I know the Camp Chance is a very, to use the vernacular, chill opportunity for young people to know law enforcement. One of the things that I found interesting was that the civil grand jury did not talk to students when they developed their report. So my recommendation to you is, let's convene groups of students at each of the high schools, Madrone included, and at Davidson Middle School, with law enforcement people, with a trained facilitator, where there can be a community circle to discuss issues of concern. And the students, by the way, in that group should be a cross-section of the student body. The kids who are in, student government, but also kids who really don't like school and may not have positive feelings about law enforcement. Let them all express their concerns and discover ways that they can make this work. I think to put it to adults and ignore students is a huge mistake. The target audience is students, and they should be involved in a significant way in the process of evaluating how to reinstate police and law enforcement presence on school campuses.
Thanks. I think your 2 minutes are up, but if you can wind it up, that would be great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just want to say that
What you're saying.
in the process, students should have full voting rights to just make the decision. And this is an effort that I've been making for many years to get students much more involved in general decision-making at schools. But this is such a hot topic that I think it presents an opportunity to really make students feel heard in the process. So I urge you to adopt that approach to, evaluating how law enforcement can be re-involved in schools in a meaningful way. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. We appreciate them. Is the other member of the public going to comment? No.
I will.
Oh.
I'm Mike Wolpert. I'm a resident of San Rafael, president of the Peacock Gap Homeowners Association.
Welcome.
And my experience of policing in schools when I was in high school in New York City was a little more confrontational. But I think it's pretty important, and I love what this gentleman just said about listening to the students. And if there was some heavy-handed policing in the past, probably pretty easy to tone down. But I would say that a few years ago, I was in the periphery of a conversation of older teens, and some of them started about cops this and cops that. And one of the Camp Chance members stood up and said, I know cops, they're not all like that. And I watched the whole group go, okay. So, so that works. And I mean, I watched 4 or 5 people change right in front of me from, we see all the stuff on TV. And so if anything is of huge value to these kids, it's that, because this was years after they were in the program. Not all cops are like that. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you so much for your time. I don't see any other members of the public that wish to speak, so we'll close public comment time. Now will be the time for the board to make any comments, but I have one question of my own. There are many school jurisdictions in Marin. Are there SROs in other jurisdictions now? Be like in Novato or Mill Valley. And
Yeah, almost everywhere. The sheriff has school
know
resource
too.
officers, the city of Novato, Mill Valley. Yeah, they're well represented throughout the
So we're
region.
kind of a little island here. Thank you.
So we're the only one who doesn't have SRO?
I don't know that we're the only, I mean, I don't think, well, Belvedere doesn't,
Yeah.
Ross doesn't. There's smaller organizations that don't,
Okay.
but, you know, we're the largest city in the county and the county
Right.
seat.
Yeah.
Well, with that, closing up on this topic, are there any final comments from members of the board on the topic? Comments?
I think it's well, other than school resource officers, I think it's very important that officers be interacting with students and not just have knowing what the students want, whether they want a school resource officer, but also what does the community think of a resource officer being in school. Okay. Yeah, that's it. And thank you for your presentation.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Chocolai?
I'm really on board with what our public folks have said is, you know, with George and them. I really like the idea of bringing this back to the students. They have student councils at every school. Let them decide for themselves. I know times change, you know. I know kids who are heavily involved with Camp Change will have a chance to put up a different sign, you know, a different picture, start painting a different pictures for some of the kids who probably already grew up in an environment with just frustrated parents, you know. And the best part about this whole thing too is education. Public education. People should learn, like parents should allow their kids to learn about all these stuff, interact with, you know, step out of that comfort zone, you know, because it's very important for kids when growing up, like to go through these process, understand what's going on around themselves in their cities, in their communities. We're all humans, you know, wearing a badge and a uniform doesn't differentiate you from the next person sitting next to you, you know. Kids these days, like you see a cop, they run. They're like, "Oh, I'm afraid," you know. They should not be, you know. And I think educating the public is number one, should be a number one, you know, topic. And I'm really on board. Like, I'm going to start, and this is what from me, I'm going to start attending the school board. I know some of the members, and I'm going to push them. And I'm going to find out why and who, you know, because I really like the idea of bringing this back. Because if Camp Change is still going, why not allow them to go into the schools, interact with these kids, and give the kids the platform to decide for themselves, not from the teacher, from the adults, not from the parents, because they already have their, you know, they come in, they already have the agenda. Let the kids decide for themselves. Because I know, like, there's smart kids in this city, you know, let them decide. And I feel so bad because if all the other surrounding cities, they have their own, you know, the SROs, why not us? It's, you know, it's the biggest city in the county, you know? And then we have like, how many high schools? Like how many schools? 17?
17 total.
17 total. That's a lot. That's a lot
17
of
total,
students.
17 total, elementary, middle, and high school. And then we have 3 high schools, San Rafael, Terra Linda, and Madrone.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, could I offer a point of consideration? So through the presentation, we're not here recommending anything to this
Right.
body. And I would just like the committee to consider, you know, the committee reports to the council and our annual report will be prepared for the city council. So just a point of consideration before this body goes to attend all of the school board meetings and pound on the dais with their 2 minutes of public time. You know, there are policy issues and funding issues and everything else involved in this. So maybe just a point of consideration that the recommendation go through the council, and then we could liaison with the school board if there's movement to pursue that.
Thank you. That actually was going to be a recommendation on my part, that it sounds like the consensus of this group and this committee is that it would be a good idea for school resource officers to be back in San Rafael, and that in our recommendation to the council, we recommend that they do everything that they can to help that happen. So that would be my recommendation. But now we're on to Member Do you have any recommendation?
I share that recommendation, and maybe I would add, not look at other ways, not just necessarily an SRO. How else could we interact with the youth? And my recommendation would be to the city council explore other ways. I feel like we should study the data somehow, some way again. I share with the community member, when I read the grand jury report, I was absolutely shocked that not a single youth was interviewed to produce that report. If we could make a recommendation to the grand jury to maybe do another investigation, it kind of pushed that off to them on getting some new data so we could present that to the school boards or our council. But hopefully we could look at other ways. Maybe SRO isn't what the community wants and needs, but how can we, I guess my recommendation would be like, let's study different ways, different avenues to broaden our interactions with youth.
Thank you so much. Mr. Davidi?
Yeah. I just also want to echo what my committee members have said and also what the public has shared. I think it's very crucial, the first interaction youth has with police, and in the way we stand right now, it's a very negative experience. You're in trouble, the police is going to come to your school. I also think it puts the school staff at a very critical place, because they have to pick up the phone and call the police, and it's like calling mom, get help. I'm sure they don't really want to make that call, so it puts them at an uncomfortable position. I think the dynamic, the way it's set up, it's just creates a unhealthy, I think, pattern. But I'm sure the school board had good intention initially when they introduced this. I'm sure they were very insightful and they had a lot of thoughts behind it. But at this point, it's not working. And I also think the re-entry back to school is really important. Should be an inclusive, collaborative approach, so kids do have some say, because you're entering back in their turf and, they're territorial. I'm sure Sergeant McGee would educate us on how youths operate. So this is their space we're going back into. And also think if we do this right, it's a great way, because I sit on these oral board hearings. We need more candidates for police officers. What better way than having youths go through the graduate high school, go through these camps and become a police officer. I just want to share that, and thank you.
Ms. Ruiz, do you have any comments or recommendations, please?
A mí me gustaría darle las gracias por todo lo que hizo anteriormente por los jóvenes, pero me pongo triste de saber que este condado de Marín ya no tenga más este programa de oficiales de recursos, pero como dicen los compañeros, quizás ya no con ese nombre, quizás otras opciones para que regrese, porque yo soy una persona de mucha fe y pienso que a veces tener un oficial en la escuela puede salvar vidas o puede salvar algún joven que caiga en drogas, en diferentes actividades ilícitas. Entonces, para mí sería muy importante, porque yo tengo un joven en mi familia y es tranquilo, pero él me platica de cosas que suceden en la escuela Terra Linda, y para mí sería muy importante que otra vez regresara este programa. Y quisiera saber si cuando decidieron quitar esto, solamente fue porque hicieron algunas preguntas en la escuela, si toda la escuela aportó. Eso es lo que yo quiero saber, si fue decisión de 2, 3 o de todas las escuelas. Gracias.
Well, firstly, I just want to say thank you for the service that you have provided to our youth. But I am also sad to hear that the SRO program no longer exists. I do believe that perhaps if we were to bring this program back under a different name, maybe that could be something that works. You know, I'm a woman of faith and I always have been a person of faith. And I think having an SRO at schools can not only help save lives, but it can also help students not fall into drugs or other type of illicit behavior. And this is a concern to me because within my family, there is a youngster, you know, in my family who's a very calm guy, who's very well behaved, but he talks about certain things that happen and that go on in his school at Terra Linda. He talks to me about these certain things, and it's concerning, some of these things that he talks about. So I would like to see this SRO program come back in some sense. And also a question, when this program got removed from schools, was it the entire school that was interviewed or that made the decision as a unit, or was it, you know, 2 or 3 people that made the decision within the school? And that is that.
Yeah, when this took place, it was in the course of a conversation at a school board meeting, and several students spoke publicly about concerns, and the board at the time reacted to those concerns and made the determination from a policy perspective.
I don't think there are any, are you done? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. So thank you, Sergeant Matheson. We appreciate your time and what you've done at the schools and your presentation tonight. Thank you so much. Thank you. And so now would be the time for staff to make any reports or comments, updates.
Just an update for next month. There'll be a presentation on homelessness by Lynn Murphy.
Mm.
And the ride-alongs are scheduled for next week. So I will send each of you a confirmation email with further details. So I look forward to hearing about that.
And so do any of the members have a report to make about any activities they've been involved in? Oh, looks like Mr. Alm wants to start.
I did participate in a couple of oral boards. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of that process. I really appreciate giving community input into selecting people who will be policing our area. Only other thing I would report is I volunteered for the Porch Fest. I was a block captain and it was a really fun experience.
I can write that. I was just about to share. I went to Porch Fest with my son. It felt very inclusive. It was cross-generational. It was it's Latin Heritage Month, so you see, you know, mainstream music, Latino music, banda music. So it was just nice to see San Rafael come together. Presidents, police officers, firefighters. So it was a nice community experience. Thank you.
Can I piggyback on that too?
Sure.
I was there not for the festival. I wish I could, but I was knocking on doors with Prop 5, with some other community members who work in nonprofit here locally. I don't know if we're allowed to talk about that. Not campaigning, no, but
I don't
that
think-
was
I don't
just,
think we
yeah.
can do political on this. So you might want to take that, you might want to take that back.
No, that's just, I mean, like, you know, I'm supporting housing for a lot of working families in the county.
Well, you could say it that way. Okay, we don't want you to get in trouble. Okay, I'm gonna skip you now. Ms. Valdez, do you have any reports to make? You okay.
Not the same as him, but
Same as
I'm
him,
not going
but-
to say anything then. Thank you.
Okay. And Ms. Alvarez, have you been involved in anything other than school?
No, because of school, not really, but been busy, but I did want to comment that because of the independence of Central America being Mexico, Salvador, Guatemala, there was less violence compared to last year, which had 2 shootings, and so that was great with the police, law enforcement, not only San Rafael, but Mill Valley and other areas, which is great. My voice is running away, so yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much, and I hope you feel better. You gave your report. Yes, you did. You're done. And Ms. Ruiz?
I made like Carla, like him. I did same. And still every Monday with Boy Scout.
Yes,
Yeah,
the Boy Scouts
thank
are
you.
great. Okay. I have a brief report. First, I wanted to thank staff for all of you for the extensive preparation for today's meeting. It was phenomenal, and we actually learned a lot just from reading what you put together. So thank you very, very much. And for you, Chief, I appreciate it. I participated in a meeting with the YWCA, which actually through a variety of mergers. It used to be YWCA of Marin, then YW Marin San Francisco. Now it's YWCA of Silicon Valley, but it includes us. And they have a program called Bloom, which is a clothing store it used to be for women wanting to go to work and be able to wear something nice for an interview. But they also pointed out that they're providing clothing for students for school, and that I was unaware that there were many students in Marin who will not go to school because they don't have the clothes to wear. So I was very impressed with the work that they're doing, and they have an empowerment program, sort of like a mini Shark Tank. They have a group of women who will go through a training for 8 weeks, and then they make a presentation of what business they want to go into to an audience, and the audience chooses who gets the scholarship. So I just thought it'd be really good to know that agency is working in Marin. I went to a Latinas Empower meeting. That was very interesting. And then 2 concerns that I alerted staff about beforehand, and we don't have to go into great length about it, but I've gotten concerns about the presence of prostituted women in the canal that seem to be being dropped off from Richmond by their traffickers. The second one was for food trucks coming into the canal area and also on 2nd Street, which I haven't seen, but blocking the sidewalks and making it difficult. And then the third concern, this is my own personal concern, that there are many carts with the fruit stands with the little colorful umbrellas. And since I'm so involved in labor trafficking and human trafficking, I always wonder if those people that are working there are getting paid and if the people are licensed. So those are just some concerns that I've had. And the last thing is we have to prepare an annual report, and I understand staff is going to help us. Can you tell us what that process will be? And then I'm done.
I'm hoping we'll do most of the work in that we formulate and condense all of your statements from January to next month. And then we will present that to you in a draft form in November. We have a couple of things scheduled for you to give your final feedback on the annual report. And then we will present it to you in January. And then I think the chief and staff will present it to city council, maybe the second meeting in January, the first meeting in February. We haven't calendared that yet, but there'll be a lot of opportunity for you to give input into the annual report based on what you guys have given us so far.
And I understand we're having a changing of the guard in November.
Yes, so we were going to talk about that next month as well, but we will be, you will be picking a new chair and vice chair. Also in November, we'll approve the dates for 2025. And then we're brainstorming ideas and workshopping ideas on how we can talk about the topics, or you guys can pick the topics for next year. So more to come on all that.
Good to know ahead of time to be thinking about. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. I believe we're done, unless you have any comments about any of the statements that were made.
I will offer, in response to your statements, Madam Chair, that the police department is well aware of the communicated concerns as it relates to the issues of prostitution, particularly in the canal. And our patrol resources are responding to that. We have from time to time set up operations to mitigate that from an impact perspective. A lot of the participants of that are victims in many cases. So that's on our radar. The other issue of food vendors is being aggressively worked on in partnership with code enforcement, the police department, and the county of Marin, given the health and safety issues. So we're managing through all of the issues that you raised.
Thank you so much. There being no other business, this meeting is adjourned. We'll see you all next month, and thank you.
Thank you.